Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something we all deal with constantly, how we communicate without words.
Yeah, and how we persuade people, or maybe
Yeah.
how people try to persuade us.
Exactly. We've got some really interesting sources guides on body language, persuasion techniques, figuring people out.
And our mission, really, is to pull out the most important stuff for you, the listener. Make sense of it all.
Right. Not just theory, but like practical things you can notice every day, from a handshake to, well, maybe spotting when someone's not being straight with you.
It's about understanding those everyday interactions on a deeper level.
Okay, let's jump in. Body language. We kind of know it. But what's the actual definition we're working with here? It's got to be more than just like crossed arms mean closed off, right?
Oh, definitely more. Our sources basically say it's any conscious or subconscious movement, posture, facial expression that sends a message.
Conscious or subconscious, okay.
And it works in a few ways. Sometimes it's deliberate, like a wink or a thumbs up, replacing speech entirely. Other times it reinforces what we're saying. Think hand gestures when you're talking makes it stronger.
Yeah, I do that all the time.
But the really fascinating bit, it can also betray how we really feel, even when we try to hide it. Things we don't control, like our pupils dilating when we're interested.
So it's like what we mean to show, what adds to our words, and what just leaks out.
Pretty much. That's a good way to put it. Leaks out. And context is key. You mentioned that.
Right. You can't just see one thing and assume.
Exactly. You need the whole picture, the situation, what else the person is doing, what's being said. Someone tapping their foot might be impatient, or maybe they just have restless legs.
Sure.
Our sources also mention illustrators. Those are the gestures that literally, well, illustrate what you're saying, like showing how big something was with your hands.
The fisherman's, it was this big gesture.
Got it. Okay, what about this word, proxemics? Sounds a bit sciencey.
It does sound a bit formal, yeah, but it's actually pretty simple. It's just how we use space to communicate nonverbally.
Yeah.
Space, like personal space.
Exactly. And the interesting thing is we usually do it without thinking. We're always kind of gauging the right distance between ourselves and others.
Okay, so there are different distances.
Yeah, the sources break it down into zones. First, there's intimate distance, touching to maybe a foot and a half away
No.
for, close relationship.
Right. Close talkers invade that one.
Yeah. Then personal distance, maybe 2 to 4 feet. That's our bubble. Feels weird if a stranger gets in there.
Definitely.
Then social distance, 4 to 12 feet. Think like business meetings, talking to new people, usually no touching. People need different amounts of the space too.
Okay.
And finally, public distance, over 12 feet.
Yeah.
Plus, now we have virtual distance, which is, well, all over the place.
Makes sense. And what happens when someone crosses into a zone they shouldn't be in?
We tend to back up, right? Try to get that comfortable space back. It's instinctive. Think about being packed in an elevator, that urge to spread out. That's proxemics.
Totally get that. So besides distance, what other nonverbal things are sending messages all the time?
Well, we've touched on hand gestures and posture, how you stand or sit, but also which way you're facing someone, your body orientation, proximity, how close you are, touch, obviously, is a big one, and personal appearance.
Appearance. Really, how much does that matter?
Apparently, quite a lot and very quickly. Some studies suggest people form impressions in under 3 seconds.
Wow, 3 seconds. Based on what?
Things like your shoes, hairstyle, clothes, even your hands and nails. It's maybe not fair, but it seems to be how we're wired for those instant judgments.
Okay, note to self. Check my shoes. What about sounds that aren't words, like size or tone of voice?
Yeah, that's called paralinguistic communication. It's all the info we get from how something is said, not just what is said.
So, like sarcasm.
Exactly. Sarcasm, tone is alarm, cold. Volume, pitch, humor, even silence sends a message. Gasps, sighs, groans, all that stuff. The way you say, that's great, can mean completely different things.
Oh, yeah. The difference between genuine excitement and total dismissal.
Okay, let's talk about the handshake. Seems basic, but our sources say it's important.
It is, surprisingly so. And the rules for it change a lot depending on where you are.
How so?
Well, things like how firm the grip should be, how quick, whether men and women shake hands the same way, if you use one hand or two, if maybe a kiss is involved, how long you hold on. It varies hugely.
That awkward moment when someone holds on too long.
Right. And in some places, a really firm handshake is seen as rude, while in others, a softer one is a sign of respect. Sometimes people might even keep shaking hands throughout the whole conversation.
Interesting. Our sources also mention some people just don't like shaking hands, like because of germs or just preference.
Yeah, that's a factor too.
Yeah.
And while maybe skipping a handshake could still be seen as a bit off in some business contexts, things like the elbow bump has become, more acceptable compromises lately. Ah, yes, the elbow bump. The signature move of the early 2020s. Okay, shifting slightly.
Hey.
Personality types. How does our personality tie into all this nonverbal stuff?
Well, our sources kind of distinguish between how we casually judge people and more formal psychological ways of looking at it, like conscientiousness or extroversion.
Right.
But the basic idea of personality is just our typical patterns, how we usually feel, think, act. It makes us unique and, well, fairly consistent.
Okay.
And there are different views on studying it. One view focuses on the unique individual. They call that idiographic. The other looks for general laws that apply to lots of people, nomosothetic.
Like studying one specific tree versus the whole forest type of thing.
Exactly. Good analogy. And our sources highlight a couple of informal types. One is the playful personality.
Playful. What does that look like?
Generally funny, energetic, outgoing, social, often creative, maybe a bit disorganized. They tend to look for fondness, approval, attention. But there's a caution. Sometimes that super friendly vibe might not be totally genuine, especially at work.
Okay. And the other type?
The precise personality. These are your perfectionists. They value order, structure, rules,
Yeah.
very organized, work-focused, often prefer working alone. They like quiet and calm over chaos.
I definitely know people who fit both those descriptions. And I guess knowing your own type helps too.
Absolutely. Self-awareness is key. Understanding your own tendencies helps you figure out how you probably come across to others and how that shapes your interactions.
Okay, now for a slightly trickier topic, deception. Lies. How do our sources define deception?
It's basically about misleading someone, misrepresenting the truth. It's not just not telling the truth, it's actively putting something else in its place.
Kind of like the idea of fake news, maybe? Replacing real info with false stuff.
That's a connection the sources make, yeah. And when you trust someone or a source and find out you've been lied to, it really damages that trust.
Definitely. Do lies come in different sizes? Like little white lies?
Yeah, they talk about fibs, those small, maybe unimportant lies. But the concern raised is whether telling those little lies makes it easier to slide into bigger, more serious deception later.
Like a slippery slope.
Potentially, yeah. Lies generally eat away at trust, honor, truth.
Are there facial expressions that might give liars away? Any tells?
Our sources mention a few possibilities, but with caveats. A deep frown might mean someone's overthinking or worried. Pursed lips could indicate anger or bitterness. A clenched jaw or teeth grinding might show tension.
Might. Could. Maybe. Sounds like it's not foolproof.
Not at all. That's why they also really stress trusting your intuition. That gut feeling when something just feels off, even if you can't pinpoint why. Understanding the person's usual behavior is really key.
That gut feeling. It's powerful sometimes. Okay, what about emotional energy? Sounds a bit woo-woo. What's the idea?
Yeah, it can sound that way. But it's really just about the overall presence or like vibes someone gives off. It's something you feel more than touch. And it can be contagious, right? Affecting the mood around them. It can draw people in or push them away. And our eyes are big players here, apparently.
Oh, so?
They can reveal a lot about underlying emotions, caring, anger, happiness, shyness, and they also project that energy outwards.
Interesting. So being tuned into that vibe. Now, speed reading people.
Yeah.
Sounds useful. What are the methods mentioned?
Our sources list three main ways. One is facial profiling, analyzing expressions. Another is body language analysis, which obviously needs more interaction time.
Right.
And the third is understanding human psychology, which takes the longest to really get a handle on someone's personality.
And facial profiling. Does that link back to the idea that face shapes tell you something about personality?
It touches on that, yeah. Like suggesting a convex face-sloped forehead, hooked nose, weaker jaw might correlate with being stubborn or impatient. A more balanced plain face with stability. And a convex-concave mix with dominance or confidence. But honestly, these are very broad generalizations. You got to be careful not to stereotype based on looks alone.
Yeah. Sounds like a recipe for misjudgment if you rely on that too much.
Okay, going darker again. Dark psychology. What is that exactly?
Well, the idea is that everyone has a dark side, potential for bad behavior, but dark psychology focuses on the really extreme stuff. Evil acts that seem to go beyond typical selfish motives, like money, power, or sex.
Like evil for evil's sake.
That's kind of the idea presented, yeah.
Yeah.
Acts of horror just because. And it often ties into 4 specific dark personality traits.
Which are?
Narcissism, Machiavellianism being manipulative psychopathy, so lack of empathy, and sadism, which is getting pleasure from others' pain.
Heavy stuff.
Yeah. And they mention how this can show up online too, with so-called eye predators exploiting the anonymity of the internet.
Okay, let's bring it back to things we can observe more easily. Posture and feet. Our sources say feet are revealing.
They can be, yeah. Often overlooked. Open posture, arms away from the body, legs uncrossed usually signals confidence, comfort, though add a frown and it might look aggressive.
Hands on hips or planted firmly on a table often reads as dominance, authority.
Okay. And the feet. What are the feet?
People tend to point their feet where they subconsciously want to go. So if someone's talking to you but their feet are angled towards the door,
They might be looking for an escape.
could be. Or just not fully engaged. It's especially telling if their upper body seems engaged but their feet tell a different story. That discrepancy is interesting.
Good tip.
Yep.
Check the feet. What about eyes? Glancing, eye contact. What signals are we looking for there?
Well, a quick glance can show desire. Glancing at the time, probably wants to leave. Glancing at a person, maybe interested in what they're saying. Glancing at someone who just got subtly insulted might show concern.
Got a raised eyebrow with the glance.
Usually disapproval, yeah. Eye contact itself builds connection, but not everyone likes it, right?
True. Some people find it intense.
And breaking eye contact could mean discomfort with the topic or the interaction, or maybe they just remembered something unrelated. It's context again.
Always context and long eye contact.
Multiple meanings. Could be interest, could be a challenge, could be intimacy. Depends entirely on the situation and the people involved.
Okay. How about showing dominance? How does that look in body language? Is it always conscious?
Often unconscious in people who are naturally dominant, the sources suggest. Things like standing really upright, taking up space sitting, or standing with legs apart, especially men.
Right.
Holding the head and chin up, trying to be physically higher than others, like standing while others sit.
Using height. Makes sense.
There's also territorial dominance, like subtly invading someone's space, maybe sitting on the edge of their desk, or touching or holding their possessions casually, implying ownership.
Sneaky.
And controlling the pace. Interrupting, making others rush by, walking or talking fast, or deliberately slowing things down by asking for just a moment when others are trying to move on.
So controlling space, possessions, and time. Got it.
Yeah.
Now this next bit sounds intriguing. The undetected mind controller. What are we talking about here?
It sounds like a movie title, doesn't it? But the idea is about people who really want to influence others for their own benefit, often very subtly.
How do they operate?
Our sources describe them as often highly logical, calculating. They plan carefully because they're afraid of being found out described as cowardly in that sense.
Okay.
They're patient, cunning. They study their target, look for vulnerabilities, emotional needs.
And how do they influence?
Subliminal influence is mentioned. It apparently works best when the target already has a strong desire for something, like the example given of thirsty people being more receptive to ads for iced tea.
Targeting an existing need.
Exactly. Exploiting needs like loneliness after a breakup, financial insecurity, the need to belong, the need for love. And this, unfortunately, can lead to serious abuse, financial, sexual, getting someone into a cult, or even just for sadistic pleasure.
That's dark. How is this different from brainwashing?
Key difference. In brainwashing, the victim usually knows the aggressor is an enemy. The effects might fade if they escape. Mind control is way more subtle. The manipulator is often seen as a friend, a helper. The victim doesn't realize they're being manipulated, so they don't resist in the same way. They might even feel like a willing participant. Dark psychology tactics are usually targeted at individuals. Brainwashing is often more of a mass technique, like in cults.
That distinction is really important.
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch gears to something maybe a little lighter. Gender differences in nonverbal communication, especially around romance.
Yeah, our sources touched on this. The general observation was that women often tend to use more subtle cues when showing romantic interest compared to men who might be more overt.
More direct, maybe.
Potentially, yeah. But it's crucial to remember these are just general tendencies. There's huge individual variation, shy guys, very forward women, everything in between. And the source material seemed mostly focused on male-female interactions in this context.
Gotcha. So what are some of those nonverbal cues that might signal romantic interest, subtle or otherwise?
Well, we already mentioned feet pointing towards you. That can be one sign. Eye behavior is a big one, too.
Like what?
Looking at you versus looking away obviously matters. Looking down might signal shyness or maybe accommodation. Enlarged pupils can indicate a positive reaction, attraction, and even blink rate. Sometimes an increased blink rate is linked to attraction or arousal.
Interesting. Pupils and blinking. Okay, what about mirroring?
Yeah.
Copying someone's body language.
Yeah, that often happens unconsciously when people feel connected or agree with each other. You just sort of naturally fall into similar postures or use similar gestures,
Uh-huh.
but you can also do it consciously, deliberately. If it's done subtly and carefully, it can help build trust and rapport. It sends that subconscious message, we're alike, we're on the same wavelength.
So speakers might use it.
Absolutely. Aligning posture with an audience, mirroring someone asking a question during Q&A, even getting the audience to do a relevant action together, the key is subtlety. If it's too obvious, it just looks weird or like you're mocking them.
Right? Don't want to be creepy about it.
Yeah.
Okay, what about building an actual emotional connection? What are the core components according to our sources?
They list several key things. Trust is the absolute foundation. You need that to feel comfortable sharing.
Makes sense.
Understanding each other's needs, desires. Acceptance, being okay with each other's flaws, no judgment.
Crucial.
Support, being there for each other, good times and bad. Shared experiences build that common ground, those memories.
Hmm.
Transparency, being open, honest. And empathy, really understanding how the other person feels, even if they don't say it explicitly.
Those sound like the pillars of any strong relationship, really. Let's loop back to the power of body language overall. It really does speak volumes, doesn't it?
Constantly. Even when you're silent, your body is talking. So there are always at least two conversations happening, the verbal and the nonverbal.
And sometimes they don't match.
Exactly. Your body language, posture, expressions, gestures can give away your true feelings, even if your words are saying something else. When they do align, when your words and body match, that's when you come across as authentic, credible.
And that matters everywhere,
Yeah.
right? Work, interviews, negotiating.
Definitely. Even just casual chats and being able to read those cues in others helps you understand them better. Maybe even spot if someone's trying to manipulate you.
Okay. What about hands specifically? They seem pretty expressive.
They really are. Energetic hand movements usually signal enthusiasm, focus, eagerness. People tend to respond well to that, intuitively.
Yeah, seems more engaging.
Dynamic gestures can make someone seem warm, pleasant, lively, whereas very still or like robotic movements might seem logical but also cold, less approachable.
What about specific gestures, like
Mhm.
pointing?
Pointing can show strength, but it can also feel aggressive, accusatory, like you're being told off. Eager gestures, lots of motion, show drive. But if you get too animated, especially waving your hands above your shoulders, it can actually make you seem less credible, maybe a bit whimsical or out of control.
Huh. So keep the jazz hands in check sometimes. Okay, let's dive into persuasion itself. What are the main principles our sources laid out?
They focus on 6 core principles, largely based on Robert Cialdini's work. First is liking. We're just more likely to say yes to people we like.
Simple enough.
Second, reciprocity. That feeling that you owe someone if they do something for you first.
The free sample effect.
Exactly. Third, social proof. We look to see what others are doing, especially when we're unsure, following the crowd.
Okay.
Fourth, consistency. We like to be consistent with things we've previously said or done. Our commitments matter.
Uh-huh.
Fifth, authority. We tend to obey or defer to people who seem like legitimate authorities or experts.
The white lab coat effect.
Kinda, yeah. And sixth, scarcity. Things seem more valuable when they're less available, limited time offers, that kind of thing.
Those 6 seem to cover a lot of ground in why we agree to things.
They really do. And they're super relevant in things like negotiation, trying to get someone to see your side.
Our sources also mentioned a couple of psychological models for behavior. Investment model, social influence model. Briefly, what are those about?
Yeah, the investment model basically views our behavior like we're weighing costs and benefits. What effort do I put in for what outcome? Our mind tracks what we want and what we might lose. Like animals deciding if crossing a river full of crocodiles is worth the food on the other side.
Risk versus reward.
Pretty much. The social influence model highlights that we're social creatures. Our behavior happens in a social context. Influence is about how one person's actions affect another's investment, their effort, emotions, etc. It leads to cooperation or conflict, and it's tied to our desire for attention and respect from others. We want admiration.
So internal calculation versus social dynamics.
Yeah.
And there was something about justification of behavior.
Yeah, the idea there is that sometimes we act based on what we see others do. What we've learned is normal in a situation. That's what people in love do, or that's how you act at a funeral, rather than purely on our own internal feelings at that moment.
Right.
Social norms guiding action.
Okay, let's revisit Cialdini's 6 principles with a bit more detail. Reciprocity first.
Right, paying back kindness. The sources mentioned Ethiopia sending aid to Mexico after an earthquake, repaying help Mexico had given years before, even though Ethiopia was struggling. That's powerful. And yeah, free samples, small gifts, all tapping into that I owe you feeling.
Makes sense.
Scarcity. Opportunities seem more valuable when they're rare. Limited editions, only 3 left in stock, creates urgency.
Authority.
Following the advice of doctors, financial advisors, people with relevant titles or uniforms, we assume they know best.
Consistency.
Sticking to our commitments. If you publicly state you'll do something, you feel more pressure to follow through. Signing petitions can lead to bigger commitments later.
Liking.
We're more easily persuaded by friends, people we find attractive, people who are similar to us, or people who compliment us.
And social proof.
Doing what others do? Fashion trends are a great example. Testimonials, reviews, lots of people like this, so it must be good. It's a mental shortcut, helps us avoid mistakes.
But it can backfire.
Yeah. The sources mention the bystander effect. If lots of people see an emergency, everyone might assume someone else will help, so nobody does. Relying on the crowd isn't always safe.
Right. Good point. Now, back to the darker side. Dark persuasion tactics. What were some examples?
One is the long con. This isn't quick. It's about building trust, rapport, sometimes over a long time, gradually guiding the target towards choices that benefit the persuader, desensitizing them along the way.
Slow burn manipulation.
Exactly. Then there's graduality. Start small, then escalate the request or the persuasion. Build a bridge of compliance, like the foot in the door technique. Masking true intentions is obviously key for manipulators. They hide what they really want. And mirroring the target state, matching their mood, posture, language to create that false sense of connection and lower their guard.
Okay, so how do we defend against this stuff?
Yeah.
How can we resist being persuaded, especially manipulatively?
Our sources had some good tips. One, maybe counterintuitive, is sometimes just not listening too closely, nodding along, but not really engaging with the manipulative words.
Interesting.
Buying time is crucial. Don't feel pressured to agree immediately. Take a moment, step back, do your own research if needed.
Slow down the process.
Yeah. Maintain healthy skepticism towards fact presented to you. Make your own decisions. And inoculation, just knowing about these tactics helps you recognize them, like getting a vaccine against persuasion tricks.
I like that. Inoculation.
Refuse to get drawn into pointless arguments. Question authority when it doesn't make sense or feels wrong. Be aware of when your tired manipulators might target you when your defenses are low.
Makes sense. Tiredness makes us vulnerable.
And recognize those times when you might be more susceptible after a breakup, job loss, big life change. Those unfreezing moments where you question things make you more open to influence. So be extra wary of new, strong influences then. And be cautious if someone tries to limit your contact with the outside world. That's a classic brainwashing tactic.
Those are really solid defense strategies. Our sources also mentioned speed reading briefly. How does that fit in?
It wasn't directly linked to resisting persuasion, more as a related skill. But I guess being able to process information quickly could help you analyze arguments faster. Techniques like not letting your eyes backtrack, using a pacer, reading chunks of words, they're about efficiency. Maybe helps you sift through persuasive fluff faster.
Maybe. Okay, what if we need to influence someone higher up, like a boss? How do we do that ethically and effectively?
First, try to get over the fear factor. Remember, it's usually part of their job to listen. Present critical thoughts constructively, invite discussion, maybe acknowledge their points first before offering your alternative.
So, respectfully disagree.
Exactly. Maintain professionalism. Politeness, respect, good posture, direct eye contact, confident voice, firm handshake but not too firm, appropriate smiling, nodding. Focus on earning their respect and trust, not just trying to be their buddy.
Good advice. Now, hypnosis popped up. What's the quick take on that?
It's described as a state of focused attention where suggestibility is enhanced. There are debates. Is it a unique trance state or more like role-playing and placebo? It's induced through suggestions, directions.
On its uses.
Hypnotherapy for treatment, stage hypnosis for entertainment. It seems pretty effective for pain control, but using it for trauma recovery or memory recall is controversial.
Why controversial?
Big risk of creating false memories. It doesn't necessarily make memory more accurate and can actually distort it. So needs caution there.
Okay. Back to negotiation. The sources stressed self-confidence again.
Yeah, it's fundamental. Hard to convince someone else if you don't seem convinced yourself. Believing in your viewpoint and projecting that confidence is key.
Right. Can we use persuasion on ourselves?
Yeah.
Self-persuasion.
It's tricky because you know the trick. But yeah, associating a behavior with a reward can reinforce it. For personal development, breaking big goals into small steps, linking new habits to old ones, that's a form of self-persuasion. And the internet plays a role now, too. We curate information that confirms our existing beliefs, selective exposure, selective forgetting. We kind of persuade ourselves without even trying sometimes, just by creating our own echo chambers.
That's a really interesting point, the self-persuasion bubble.
Yeah, and advertising, constant communication. It all increases persuasive opportunities. It's important to try and distinguish between being genuinely informed and just being persuaded, applying critical thinking, maybe even those 6 principles, to evaluate what you encounter. Repetition also works. Ideas get normalized just by hearing them over and over, like earworms, but for beliefs.
Okay. Any other influencing tactics mentioned?
Yeah, things like exuding confidence, even if it's not entirely solid, speaking smoothly, glibly, learning from people seen as masters of persuasion, and more darkly, exploiting specific vulnerabilities, triggering guilt in someone with an authoritarian upbringing, using flawed logic on rational types, playing on emotions for sensitive people. The sources give examples for influencing bosses, teachers, parents.
Some of those sound like they're crossing the line again.
Yeah.
So revisiting dark persuaders, what's the core difference one last time?
It's the intent. Dark persuaders prioritize their own benefit, period. No concern for the target's well-being or morality. They plan meticulously, understand the target deeply, often use subtle manipulation to make the target think it's their own idea. They might try to break down the target's self-worth to make them accept new beliefs, like in cults. They create or emphasize a need, use cognitive biases like anchoring. It's strategic and self-serving.
Whereas standard persuasion ideally considers the other person and the ethics.
Exactly. There's an awareness of moral implications.
Okay, super clear now. Persuasion versus manipulation. One aims for agreement, maybe mutual benefit, uses reason. The other uses deceit, pressure for self-gain, often leaving the target feeling bad.
Right. Persuasion is fundamental to positive things: counseling, democracy, public health campaigns. Manipulation is the distortion of that used by con artists, dictators.
What about some practical, maybe ethical persuasion techniques?
Offering samples or trials taps into reciprocity, lets people see the benefits. Creating genuine scarcity can work, highlighting limited opportunities. Just got to be careful it's not false scarcity, which is manipulative.
Okay. How can these principles be used positively in the workplace? By bosses, for instance.
Leaders can definitely use persuasion for good, creating a happier, safer environment. The sources mention principles like conviction, linked to reciprocity. If you show belief, others might reciprocate. Engagement, coherence, consistency, getting people committed. Using social facts, social proof, showing others are on board. Liking, authority, scarcity.
Any examples?
Giving unexpected rewards for good work. Reciprocity. Having employees make public commitments to safety standards. Consistency. Starting with small changes to build towards bigger commitments. Using these tools ethically can boost morale and productivity.
Good stuff. Now, analyzing people day to day, what should we look out for?
Well, body language is huge, like 55% of communication, some say. Observe naturally, don't overanalyze every little twitch. Appearance can be a clue to self-esteem. Good communication skills and emotional intelligence help you understand others. Learning someone's baseline, their normal behavior, helps you spot deviations, like sudden nervousness, which might indicate something's up. And watch for manipulative behaviors, people being deliberately difficult to get attention, or overly complimentary sweet talkers trying to lower your guard.
Be aware of those patterns. Okay. Power is influence, strength is persuasion. Unpack that a bit.
It's about distinguishing leadership from just holding power. Real strength, it suggests, comes from the ability to persuade, to influence willingly. Trust is the foundation for that influence and dedication. If people don't trust a leader's confidence or values, the power doesn't mean much. Influence grows with experience, and everyone can develop it. Effective leaders know their sources of power and how to persuade ethically using their education, experience, and character.
So influence built on trust and credibility is the real strength. What about subliminal persuasion again? Quick recap.
Manipulators use those nonverbal cues as an extra layer, targeting feelings, the subconscious creating enthusiasm, comfort alongside logical arguments. Advertising uses it heavily, optimizing ads based on brain scans, eye tracking, trying to hit us below conscious awareness.
Sneaky.
Hmm.
And deception basics one more time.
Causing someone to believe a lie, big or small, kind or cruel. It's common even honest people tell white lies to avoid conflict or hurt feelings, but manipulators use deception strategically to hide things and control people.
And the most extreme form, brainwashing.
That's described as a systematic, often group-based effort to force changes in belief and behavior without consent. Requires total isolation, dependence, breaking down identity. The brainwasher controls everything, sleep, food, and replaces the old self with new beliefs. Can even be self-inflicted through intense repetition, like affirmations taken to an extreme.
Sounds truly terrifying. So finally, what are the most important steps to defend ourselves against all this?
Confront illusions. Make conscious choices. Trust your instincts that gut feeling is important. Listen carefully to how people answer direct questions. If you realize you're being manipulated, act decisively. Don't let denial set in. Cut ties with manipulators, even if it's hard. Use both logic and intuition. Heal from past experiences, don't just dwell on them. And cultivate that inner voice through self-awareness, maybe meditation, critical thinking about the influences around you.
Combine logic and intuition, act decisively, trust yourself. Great advice.
Act.
So the key difference again, dark persuasion is selfish, amoral, strategic, often disguised. Standard persuasion considers ethics.
Exactly. And watch out for those covert tactics. Direct lies, twisted truths, half-truths, backhanded compliments, belittling, word games.
Our sources even had that story about the rental car agent using a dramatic personal anecdote to sell insurance.
Yeah, storytelling can be very persuasive, but effective ethical persuasion often means being upfront about potential downsides too. Builds trust. The goal should be taking away the fear of saying yes, making the person feel genuinely better off.
And be aware of those common persuasion traps. Scarcity tactics, reciprocity tricks, trying to sound overly fluent, using social proof like photo ops. Even just a warm greeting can be a tactic in sales.
It's all about awareness.
Wow, we have covered a ton today. This has been a real deep dive into, well, how we interact, body language, persuasion, the good, the bad, the ugly, and how to protect ourselves.
And hopefully what you take away is a sharper understanding of all this, more awareness in your own interactions, a better ability to influence ethically, and importantly, to recognize when someone might be trying to influence you in ways that aren't so ethical.
Definitely. So maybe the final thought is this. As you go about your interactions, pay a little more attention. Notice the nonverbals. Think about the influence dynamics.
Yeah.
Trust your gut.
And consider the ethics of it all. How do you use influence? How are others influencing you? It's a complex world out there.
Keep learning, keep observing, reflect on what we've talked about in your own life. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.